Needs to be a training issue there too.
Yeah, so I think, again, there's a couple different stages to what we do. There's one, establishing the standard.
Right.
Two, just the repetitive, right? Like it needs to be not only something that we're constantly training our project managers on. They should have our, again, some of what we're talking about right now is the scope, what we want to include in the scope to make sure that the renovation doesn't just look good now, that it looks good 10 years from now.
Right.
The second part will be making sure that the PMs and the contractors understand, what our expectations are with quality. So each time Brian or Bill or any of the project managers are on a job site, they have a point of reference to go back to say, hey, listen, this needs to be addressed. Here's why, and then here's how we expect it to be addressed and what the finished product should look like. I think the thing is now is there's enough, even if it's a little bit gray, right? Gray area for the project manager. Like what's acceptable, what's not, because I mean, you have 5 contractors look at the way that framing's done, and you might get 5 different opinions about what's allowable, what's acceptable, and what's not. So for me, I think what we can create is a standard that we use when we create the scope, right? Like we're going to include these items in the scope of work, even though it's maybe not necessarily needed, but because we have long-term, understanding of what we're trying to deliver as an investment, we're going to do these things, even though it's fine now and it's we're going to abandon it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. That doesn't apply.
Okay.
If it will break, fix it. That's kind of our approach, right? So that's the sort of mantra that we want to bring towards quality. The second part will be is educating and reminding the project managers of that. And then anytime they have conversations around the scope of work or the quality, it should always include that point of reference, right? Like we did that, we looked at that quality manual that Tom put together. I think we can kind of revamp that, tweak it, add to it, update it a little bit. And so yeah, certainly, what we can improve throughout the process when it comes to punching a house and all of that stuff will be helpful. But if we give them a consistent, just, reputable checklist to work from, they don't necessarily have to be the bad guy. It's like, hey, I'm just enforcing the rules. Here's the rules. And by the way, when you're talking to a contractor, part of our onboarding process is going to be, even when they come to work for us for the first time and when they take a job, will be, hey, here's our quality manual, right? When you agree to this job, you're in advance agreeing to these standards. So I think today it just starts with us. I think one of the things that we can take away today, and that every budget and every job we start from today moving forward, will be the inclusion of items now that we're gray. Like we're not 100% sure whether it's needed or not, but let's get out in front of that and say, listen, we believe it's necessary. We're not going to allow a home inspector or someone else to tell us it's needed. We just want to set a standard that says, these are all things that we're going to include with the prices of our homes. And what we've seen is, particularly when you look at some of the larger renovations where we've done literally everything, because the house, sometimes it's easier when the house is just trash, takes all the gray out, like everything's got to be done. People are willing to pay a premium. They are. Right. I mean, it's like, if you do these 5 or 6, 7 things, say we spend an extra $2,000 a house, I think it'll be reflected in what people are willing to pay for it. It'll be reflected in what people are willing to pay as rent. And then again, what I'm thinking about now is 5 years down the road, someone that bought a property from us, 5 years from now is going to go, wow, like other than like routine maintenance and a couple paint jobs and some, tic-tac repairs, I haven't really had to spend any substantial money. And that what ultimately will separate us from other people. Plus, I think it's the best way for us to build out that business is with 5, because the people that are buying these properties aren't doing it to make a quick buck. They're buying these properties so that 8, 10, 12, 15 years from now, they have a solid investment that requires maintenance and not renovation, right? Like we should be able to deliver properties that are literally 15 years before they require any substantial renovation. Does it make sense?
Yeah. So I would say on that conversation and kind of what Anthony, you and Liz have typed, you're really back to your big ticket items.
Yeah.
Kitchens, roofs, water heaters, HVAC,
yep.
windows.
So let me throw a couple of things at you. Parging of basement walls.
It's on 90% of my work list.
Okay. What else? What else?
Dry lock's on 100, which I never knew.
Yeah.
When you said about the old stone foundations were made to do it, I never knew that.
We're made to what? Weep a little bit, like
Yeah, so we would dry lock them actually.
in makes it worse.
because it forces the.
It
Hydrostatic
adds
pressure.
hydrostatic pressure from the outside and blows the mortar out.
Okay.
So, but like what Anthony has up there, pressure wash siding is on everyone. Chimney repair, unless I look at the chimney and it looks like somebody did it, touched it, it's not like messed up at all.
I'd say
Okay.
80% of what's up here is on Chad's standard scope already.
Yep, downside expansions,
I
mold,
agree.
mildew,
The
cut
issue is
joints.
it's not getting
Yeah.
executed.
Right.
So, what is there anything other than what may be obvious that we need to do to take it from Chad's scope to being executed?
To like Eric's point though, a lot of these could be water issues that you should and would address on a standard walkthrough. Right? The mold and mildew, downspout extensions, that doesn't, you don't wait for the end of the rehab. That's stuff that you should check every time you go.
Glad not the only one that gets that every day.
One thing I'll just jump in and say is I know that, and this is kind of a bad word around here, but Slate House
Yeah.
has in their leases that basements may get water and they have no responsibility.
Okay.
So I took a look at some of 360's leases. I didn't see it in there.
So that's good. What you're addressing there is more of a tenant expectation, so that the tenant does not expect that if he gets some moisture in a basement. And listen, if we're talking about homes, which a lot of ours are, that were built in 1900 to 1960, most of them get water. Particularly when you're talking about row homes and townhouses, there's no impervious space really where, or an opportunity for runoff. A lot of times it's ponding and curbs, and so, yeah. I mean, I think from a leasing perspective, that's a good note for us to make, because ultimately what happens is if the tenant is conditioned not to expect that, then the complaint won't make it to the owner, because the owner is really only going to address issues when they're brought to their attention, right? Like if the tenant goes, hey, I mean, they talked about water accumulation in basements. What's up, man? Okay, if the resident knows that water accumulation in a basement is not something that's out of the ordinary, they're not going to report. They're not going to fill out a maintenance form, which means it's not going to go to the owner, and then ultimately the owner. So the only thing then you need to address is that as long as we're doing periodic inspections, which should be done every quarter through property management, if we find moisture in the basement that's accepted by the resident but could cause some type of residual damage, then we should have the opportunity to go back and fix it, because it could be a downspout extension. Gutters could be clogged, but there could be some other stuff. So that I think we're okay with. It's a good note that maybe we include that in the basements to say that, hey, in properties, it's not out of the ordinary to have water accumulation or dampness in basements, and it's not something that's considered routine maintenance for property management.
The other piece of that is the RTI piece. So we're getting hit on that on almost every RTI.
And it's moisture meters on.
For the RTI, we have to prove that we've worked on it, resolved it, and then it's not going to continue.
Well, so now, to what we talked about that he taught me, if you're putting a moisture meter on a stone foundation, it's going to be wet because it's made to be wet.
We're supposed to retain the water behind
It's
it.
supposed to let it seep through so
Yeah.
it doesn't create pressure to push the wall.
So, well, what I'm saying is up front, we're saying, hey, we fix all significant findings, except they're always going to call out moisture in basements. Basements pre-1978 or whatever you want to call it are typically designed to allow moisture in. So if it's a house that predates this year, that's not going to be a significant finding that we address.
And we would also have to get a moisture meter then, that we would know it up front,
Yeah.
if we want to go down that road.